Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Belonging, webinar number 3, Fostering Belonging Individually and Structurally. My name is Aisha Lee, and while folks are signing in, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're calling in from. Please note the webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link in a few days. Just give folks a minute. All right, I see some of those chat introductions coming in. Please keep them going. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Welcoming America. So Welcoming America is the host organization for this webinar today. And if you're not familiar with us, we're a national and international nonprofit organization. We help local communities become more welcoming, create places where everyone can belong. One of the ways we do that is by lifting up promising practices from the field, many of which you'll hear about today, and sharing them with folks on the ground who are interested in the topic. Of course, you can find more resources on our website, which is welcomingamerica.org. You can also read there about how to become a member, so you have full access to even more offerings like this webinar today and more. So as I mentioned, this webinar is part of a series, and my colleague Jordan Crumroy headed up that series, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that. Jordan?
Great, thanks so much, Aisha. So today's webinar is part of a series we've been doing called Fostering Belonging Individually and Structurally. And this series has 3 videos and 3 accompanying webinars, all centered on belonging. What does it mean? What does it look like? And how do we work in our communities to create belonging as individuals, but also with structural impact? And so hosted by Welcoming America, these videos feature prominent leaders on belonging, and each of them is accompanied by this webinar that digs deeper. The training is part of Belonging Begins With Us, a campaign that's dedicated to fostering a more welcoming nation where everyone, regardless of where they come from, can belong. And if you'd like to learn more about that, we invite you to take a look at belongingbeginswithus.org. Now, if you'd like to watch the films, perhaps maybe you missed it or you missed one of the last webinars, don't worry. You can visit our website, which you'll see at the top on the slide, to take a look at those. The first webinar was an introduction into this field. The second webinar is about interpersonal and intergroup othering and how do we combat that with examples from the field. And of course, today, this is our final webinar of the series where we'll focus on structural othering and antidotes to create belonging within systems and environments and structures. And today's webinar is supported by an interview with disability rights activist Judy Human. If you haven't watched that video, I really recommend that you take a look at it sometime this week. So thank you so much for being here, for being part of the series. I hope you'll watch all 3 videos and definitely take a moment to go back and look at the webinars we've done over the past few weeks. So Aisha, I'll pass it back to you for a few housekeeping items.
Thanks, Jordan. So for today's webinar, I just want to remind everyone to use the chat feature, and you can enter any questions you have during that chat feature. Our team is monitoring the chat and will incorporate as many questions as we can at the end of the presentations. Second reminder that this webinar is being recorded and you will receive a link within a few days. And now I'd like to move us forward to introduce our speakers for today. As I said, my name is Aisha Lee, and I am the Deputy Director of Welcoming America. I've been in the nonprofit sector for my whole career, and at Welcoming America about 6 years. I'm the daughter of immigrants from Pakistan, and I grew up in rural North Carolina. I'm really excited to be here today and to be a part of this discussion, and really thank the speakers for sharing their work with us. So our first speaker is Tonika Johnson. She's a visual artist and photographer from Chicago's South Side, Englewood neighborhood. She was featured in Chicago Magazine as a 2017 Chicagoan of the Year for her photography of Englewood's everyday beauty countering its pervasive media coverage of poverty and crime. Her everyday Inglewood photography was exhibited at Loyola University's museum in 2018. Her current project, Folded Map, visually investigates disparities among Chicago residents while bringing them together to have a conversation. It was also exhibited at the Loyola University Museum in 2018 from July to October. Second speaker will be Milzy Carrasco. She serves as the Director of Neighborhood Engagement and was appointed by Mayor Soros in 2018. She brings with her a passion for sustainable community development while fostering inclusion and equity for all Lancastrians. Milzy is the City of Lancaster's first Director of Neighborhood Engagement. She uses her passion, experiences, and skills to ensure that Lancaster's neighborhoods are diverse, vibrant places where relationships can grow and thrive. Welcome, Milzy. And finally, we have Daniella Paz Peterson. As a brown woman, immigrant social worker from Chile, her personal, professional, and volunteer experiences have given her a comprehensive understanding of community dynamics, especially relating to disenfranchised populations. With a bachelor's degree in social work and 15 years of experience working with nonprofits, city government, a juvenile detention center, and public schools. She currently works at the Trust for Public Land and has adeptly cultivated both neighborhood and institutional partnerships that bring stakeholders like residents, and community leaders and faith-based organizations to the forefront of the planning process. Leveraging the vision and creativity of local artists, Daniella's work provides space for all ages to lend a voice and a hand in community development. Although her work is based primarily in Chattanooga, Daniella seeks to create replicable community strategies, such as the Park Picture Day, which gives families the chance to have a professional photograph taken in a neighborhood park. So I know everybody is super excited to hear about this work. We're gonna move to the first presentation. Each presenter will have a few minutes to share their work. And as I said, we'll take questions at the end. So please enter your questions into the chat. I'll now pass the mic to speaker one, who is Tonika Johnson, to present her work with Folded Map.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Aisha, for the introduction. As she said, my project, Folded Map, visualizes Chicago's segregation and inequity in a unique way that you all will learn shortly. And the most important part of this unique visualization is that I brought residents together who live at corresponding addresses in racially and economically different neighborhoods, 15 miles apart, and affectionately refer to them as map twins. So I would like for you all to learn about Folded Map and map twins in this next video.
The more perfect union aims to show that what unites us as Americans is far greater than what divides us. And this morning, we're showing you a new approach to bridging divides in Chicago. Neighborhoods from the city's north and south sides are banding together to take on some very deeply rooted issues. The differences between these communities, they are stark. But as Adriana Diaz shows us, together they are tackling segregation and the inequity that comes with it.
Do you have any of those posters left? Yeah, I do.
Chicago residents Nanette Tucker and Wade Wilson share a love of gardening and craft beer.
That would be kind of cool.
It would be cool.
They're like neighbors, sort of.
Wade is called your map twin. Why are you guys twins? We're twins because when you follow the map, we touch one another on the map, north and south.
Like many cities, Chicago's a grid with many streets spanning north to south. If you fold a map of the city in half, you can match addresses on the north side with the same block on the south side.
You lived all your life never thinking you had a twin. And now
Now I have one.
yes.
They live about 15 miles apart, but Wilson and his wife Jennifer live in the majority white North Side neighborhood of Edgewater, while Tucker is in the mostly black South Side neighborhood of Englewood.
How would you explain the differences between both of your neighborhoods, which are essentially equidistant from the center, but worlds apart in many ways?
It's very clear that neighborhoods primarily on the north side have had more investment. Everything from the street lighting to grocery stores and restaurants. It's plentiful on the north side, and it's not here.
It's almost like you feel a light come on at a certain spot when you're going north. And when you're coming back south, you can feel the gloom that's upon us in Englewood.
Curiosity.
They met through Tonika Lewis-Johnson, a social justice artist who grew up in Englewood, a community often in the news.
2 mass shootings on
Shot in the head this
drive-by shooting claims the life of a 15-year-old boy in West Englewood.
Lewis-Johnson created the Folded Map Project, which includes this film, to change the conversation. She contrasts how the same street, like Ashland Avenue,
They look very different.
looks on the north side
The sidewalks,
and the south side.
the maintenance of the building, none of which have anything to do with gun violence, only disinvestment.
Chicago's segregation is due in part to racist policies like redlining, where banks would designate properties in minority areas, delineated in red, as too risky for mortgage lending, excluding Black Americans from a primary pathway of building wealth, homeownership.
You have neighborhoods that are predominantly Black that have low home ownership as a result of the discriminatory practices. Businesses left, so you don't have a business corridor, so therefore you don't have jobs. And now the schools are starting to fail because they aren't properly funded.
Her solution, bring the North and the South together with map twins.
It can feel so overwhelming to try to take on systemic racism, but you have found a way to almost chip away at it one person at a time, one pair at a time.
Yes. Let's use segregation as the actual thing that can connect us.
In her project, she doesn't shy away from uncomfortable truths.
How much was your home?
It was $61,000.
And how much was your home?
$535,000.
You asked Wade and Nanette what they each paid for their house. You know, it felt a little awkward.
I think the awkwardness helps people understand how we're all participating in this system that was created before us. And it doesn't truly reflect how we want to connect with each other today.
Frankly, we're privileged, and it's hard to sit next to a friend who hasn't enjoyed that privilege. We realize that there's an opportunity to actually do something.
Wilson and Tucker are doing something together. 3 years after they met through the Folded Map Project, with others they created Englewood Renaissance, which is helping beautify parts of Englewood and is now focusing on increasing homeownership here.
Creating a community together. The economics might be different, the neighborhoods might be different, but the core of who I am is pretty much the same as Wade and Jennifer. I want the same things they want.
For CBS This Morning, Adriana Diaz, Chicago.
This is such an important story.
Yes.
It is such an important story. You have the same street and the different economic values and why that's happened. And
the difference in the numbers, Anthony.
Yeah.
61,000 versus 500,000 plus. But it's a perfect example to show that story on the same day that we did the 110 project.
Yes.
Because it shows you that it starts there.
Yes.
And that's why this disparity and pointing out the disparity. Because I know there are many white people look and say, well, I don't have the privilege either.
This is not ancient. It shows it's not ancient history.
No.
The legacy of these practices from the mid-century are with us today, and they will continue to be with us because the value of these homes is the value of these homes.
Yeah.
And the question now, as we become aware of it, is what are we going to do about it?
And recognizing that it is an issue.
Yeah.
It is a major problem in this country.
And as long as that economic disparity continues to exist, you will have these differences will persist.
Yeah, so much more than planting a garden together.
Yeah.
That's very lovely, but it's so much more than that.
Well, although Gail said it's more than planting gardens, I actually disagree with her. I'm going to show you the impact of planting gardens together. It's not about the actual garden itself, although that's symbolic, but it is the connections that are made and the time that it will take to develop the relationships that really can help amplify and disrupt segregation. So with that being said, I'm going to show you a little bit more of the MAP twins and their garden project, so you can understand how it is a critical aspect of bridging these divides.
It's a concept that's been building for about 3 years. It started with Tonika Johnson's Folded Map project. My wife Jennifer and I were the first Northside Map twins with our neighbor Nanette here on the 6100 block of South Bishop. And we've kept up the relationship for the last 3 years, and we've talked about, you know, what we can do to build on it in order to close the gaps between the neighborhoods in Chicago with regard to social justice, economic equity, and what have you.
We started talking about putting a group together and somewhat modeling after Tonika's folded map. We decided that we wanted to do like block twins. We just want change on our block. We want to matter on our block. We're gonna plant flower boxes at the corner, entering into the 6100 block on Bishop. Some of the elderly neighbors want flowers in front of their house, so we're gonna dig up and put flowers in front of their houses. And we just coming together as a community from the north side and the community from the south side to bring one community together.
We're doing a beautification project just to get people from the north side and the south side together, working together to help beautify the block where the residents of this block want it to be beautified.
My hope is that we'll have broader conversations about how we can support one another, think about why our blocks are similar and different, and what are the systemic issues that might drive that difference.
I'm so excited to see people from all walks of life and different neighborhoods come together to improve the block and make it a beautiful space.
To see it happening and to be a part of it happening in a place that I grew up in, a place that my aunt has lived for years, is a beautiful thing.
Sadie planted 2 planters she made a new friend. What's her name again? Justice?
Yeah.
Justice, how old is she?
10.
And how old are you?
9.
Yeah.
This is community. Anytime we can get together, meet new people, meet neighbors, make new friends, have a good time in safety, you can't get past it.
And I just believe if people give it a chance, everybody can have it. You just have to give it a chance.
And so, you know, contrary to what Gail said, these are the kind of interactions that segregation prevents us from having. And just imagine all of these people who enjoy gardening would not have had the opportunity to meet each other and garden together and think about why they haven't met each other before. And it has nothing to do with them not liking each other, them not having the same interests. It's purely because of Chicago's segregation. And so I was so overwhelmed with the positively abundant response to my project Folded Map that is truly just an art project that was exhibited in 2018 here in Chicago. But the response to it was so positive and quite lovely that my contact list that I started in 2018, just so I could stay in touch with people who came to the exhibit, quickly grew to 1,000 in a couple years. And everyone wanted to meet their map twin. And I knew I wasn't going to be arranging map twins for the rest of my life. So I wanted to create something that people could use to have a self-guided experience, and situate them so that they could potentially meet their map twin. And so that's when I decided to create the Folded Map Action Kit. The Action Kit is this beautiful folder that people can sign up to receive for free, or you can go to foldedmapproject.com and download the PDF version of it if you have a lot of ink to spare, but we tried to minimize the use of the black ink. But this Action Kit kind of gives an explanation of the project by showing the different demographic and statistical information of the neighborhoods that are in Folded Map, which is my home neighborhood, Inglewood, and its North Side map twins, Edgewater, Rogers Park, and Andersonville. So you can see how the race and the economic impact is different. And it also includes quotes from the map twins themselves, so people can understand how these statistical differences translate into our everyday lives. And so after that, we invite people to do the workbook, which is an invitation to run errands in your map twin neighborhood. So errands that speak to the different ways in which sectors treat neighborhoods, ultimately inequitable. And so some of the errands include going to buy an organic apple. It's a very different experience. Go to take out $20 at an ATM. Go buy lotion. You would be surprised to decide, to learn how different something like going to buy lotion is very different in a place where segregation and inequity exists. So each of those errands will hopefully give people an expanded understanding of how the history of racism in not only Chicago, but in other cities where segregation exists, how it impacts us today. And so if you are interested, like I said, you can go to Folded Map Project to sign up to get the Action Kit. And I look forward to your questions and you sharing with me any of your thoughts about Folded Map. Thank you.
Wow, Tonika, that was so special. And I have so many things I want to ask you, but I'm going to move on, and we will come back to weaving in a better discussion about everything that you've achieved. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, we're going to move to our second presentation now, which is some time with Milzy Carrasco.
Thank you, Aisha, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, the whole entire team, for inviting the city of Lancaster and welcoming Americas. Just appreciate this opportunity. It's going to be really hard to follow Tonika and her presentation, and our presentation, well, my presentation is going to be a little bit, it's going to be more focused on structural belonging, that concept, and how do we institutionalize this work into local government. So the first side here is really the focus of the administration, Mayor Sirachi, and really the work of the department and the foundation of the Department of Neighborhood Engagement here in the city of Lancaster. Again, Milzy Carrasco, Director of Neighborhood Engagement. Very new department for the city of Lancaster. It started in 2018 and really on the foundation of building a stronger and more equitable Lancaster block by block. So very similar concept from Tonika's presentation is really how do we engage with folks and really listen to our constituents and our residents on a very block level. And that's really the foundation of the work that we do. Next slide, please, Anthony. So a little bit about the city of Lancaster. There's about 60,000 residents. 40% are Hispanic, Latino, Latinx descent. We are the highest per capita refugee settled city in the US. So that's really a big deal and something that we're super honored about. And we're the first certified welcoming city in Pennsylvania. In 2019, we became welcoming certified. And so there's two different avenues that we're going to talk about today in the next few slides. If you can go to the next slide, Anthony. So block by block, the mayor's strategic plan is really about equities at the cornerstone of our strategic plan and all the work that we do. Our office is really about infusing community engagement into every city project. And that sounds fairly easy, but it's really not. And so, and I'll share a little bit about with you about some of those tactics. The agenda is really, we're going to talk about community-centered approach, how we're institutionalizing this work, and then one of our very dear first community engagement programs, which is called Love Your Block. Next slide, please. And our communications manager put this slide in because he truly believes, and we all believe here, is it's not only talking about this work, is really about walking alongside and doing this work. And that's what we're here to talk about. Next slide, please. So this is our Strong Neighborhoods model, and it was actually created and drawn by a local resident and a local artist here. And so when we started in 2018, just talking about what does a strong neighborhood look like, we went to our residents and we asked them. And so this model really represents, and it's all, you know, again, responses from our residents, where residents are coming up and identifying key issues in their neighborhoods, working with city government. Internally, city government has a working group that's across all departments, really collaborating and deliberating and coming up with solutions to some of these problems. We also know that there's more support with outside partners. So how are we working alongside nonprofits, volunteers, neighborhood groups, and what's the data showing us? With all of this, we're developing collaborative programs. So with, and we believe that this model is really, that supports a stronger, more equitable neighborhood here in the city of Lancaster. Next slide, please. So how did we institutionalize this work? So we started with a language access plan. Prior to 2019, we did not have a language access plan or policy here in the city. We have a dedicated language access coordinator that's watching right now and really is the backbone of all this work. Zaira Falou, want to give her a little shout out. She's developing tools and services. We have a language access line. We're looking at video remote interpretation now. And the city's hired a leadership development and DEI manager who's Sharon Allen Span. This is the first time a city our size really focused on DEI work and really institutionalizing and creating policy around this work is really exciting. We have a trauma-informed community engagement specialist that we're working on hiring right now. And we're really focused on project planning. What's the process for infusing engagement into a stormwater project in our Department of Public Works. Next slide, please. Some of the citywide policies, as I mentioned, is we standardize language access clauses in partnership with our work with Welcoming Cities. We provide document translation for all of our departments and interpretation services. We've launched a new platform, which is called Engage Lancaster. You can go there now if you like, where we have all of our city projects. It's a public participation platform. It's accessible. It's translated right now in Spanish. We want to increase accessibility with other languages on that site. And we've also distributed services through our language line ASL interpretation. So I know for bigger cities, this is like standard, but for a city our size, this is fairly new and we're really excited and proud of this work. Next slide, please. So one of the programs that I wanted to share with you is our Love Your Block program, and that started in 2019, and it's a community-based program where residents can apply for a grant. They have to work in a cohort of 5 to 10 residents, identify a key problem in their neighborhood, and then come up with a proposal on how they're going to resolve that problem and how the city funds it. So in 2019, we had 11 projects. This is really new. Department of Neighborhood Engagement's new. And then in 2020, look, you can see that jump. We had 54 projects. Now we have over 1,800 volunteer hours. We have 250 new volunteers that we're engaging with here in the city. We had over 58 mini grant applications. So those numbers continue to grow and we're really happy about that. Next slide, please. And here's some examples of our Love Your Block. So we had a local artist create a coloring book during quarantine time of her residents. She took pictures, drew them, and then had coloring books printed and distributed them to her neighbors. We had someone do porch portraits. We had a local muralist go outside and just start painting murals, you know, in the community. So that was pretty cool. Next slide, please. And here's Jenny Gurman. She is the artist that created the coloring book, quarantine coloring book. That's what she calls it. Next slide. Charlene Camara used her grant dollars and with community members developed community masks that she distributed. I don't know if everyone remembers when COVID first hit, it was like, where do I get masks and what do I do? And so that was her response to the community need at the time. Next slide, please. Michelle Johnson provided stoop portraits where she went around the neighborhoods and asked families to come out on the porch and she would take pictures of them. Next slide. And there is one more, and I'm sorry that I missed this slide in the presentation, but there is one more project that we had that was really exciting. And that was a project on a refugee journalism project where we had refugee leaders here take classes with a local journalist and write about their projects and about their history and about their transition here. And one thing that I really didn't dive too much into is a lot of our projects, the diversity of the applicants is just huge, working closely with the refugee population. And I will provide a link in the chat so that you can see the refugee youth journalism project so you can learn a little bit more about that. With that, thank you again for the opportunity. Always, you can go to cityoflancasterpa.com to learn more about the work that we're doing. And it's just such a privilege and honor to be here with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Milzy. I think everybody's ready to visit Lancaster now. We're going to hear from our third speaker, and then we'll, again, take some questions and have some discussions. So Daniella Paz Peterson, over to you.
Thanks, Isha. Wow, after the two other presentations, I'm just honored to be here. And first of all, thanks to Welcoming America for all the work that you do for all of us. I couldn't believe that you invited me to be here, and so I'm gonna do my best to respect your time. So my name is Daniella Paz Peterson. I'm from the Mapuche land, now known as Chile, but I'm based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But currently, actually, I'm in Chile. I just arrived this morning after almost 2 years without seeing my family. Now I'm able to be with them. I'm in quarantine now, so for the next 5 days, I'm gonna be in the same place. So next slide. Thanks, Anthony. I'm gonna share with you today a very special project to me, Park Picture Day. And currently this project, it's with the Trust for Public Land. No, currently it's like originated and we're moving forward with the Trust for Public Land. The Trust for Public Land is a national organization that we create parks, we conserve land, and we believe in land for people. We also believe that every person in the United States should have access to a quality park in a 10-minute walk. So that's why we work. We work for access, we fight for access, and we want people to have like enjoyable experiences in parks. So what I'm gonna talk a little bit is when we talk about physical infrastructure like parks, and how do we also need to think about social infrastructures. So it's not just the park. We don't do just the parks. So next slide. So the project, it's one of my favorite projects, or my favorite project ever, for a few reasons. One of them, it's because I was able to bring myself into the project. I'm an immigrant, and that informed a lot of my work when it can't. And then when I work with immigrant communities, easier to connect to, and also to be empathic with other communities too. So I use that as a tool. And this project was actually inspired by my mother. I was like, what she would like to, when she gets excited about me living here so far away from all of them. and I thought about a picture. So I think each family will get excited if they get a picture of you, in their mail. So we start thinking about this kind of experience and how we can take pictures of people. And I didn't want to recreate the wheel. So in South America, Central America, it's normal that a photographer are at the park, normally with donkey or llamas. This time we didn't bring them in, but hopefully in the future we can have them. So we just went into a park. Well, we just went into a park. I'm going to unpack a little bit of that with a professional photographer and start taking pictures of people. The first one that we did was actually the last weekend before all quarantine and COVID experience started. So we were lucky enough that we were able to do that. So with the pictures, I also want to make you smile. What do you think? When we talk about belonging and when we bring all of this, we normally see our own communities as problem and issue. And I want to bring that we bring beauty and we bring experiences. So I just want to highlight the human experience of all of that too. So next slide. I'm going to be honest with you, when I moved to the United States and asked this question to myself, not even asked, actually just I realized I was thinking this way, who I was imagining in public space. And I never imagine myself. If you ask me, imagine someone in a public space, imagine a family in a public space. It always was like a nuclear family, most of the time white, or most of all the time white. So, and on the other hand, it wasn't myself or anyone like me or a person of color. So when we say that we want parks for people, we don't want the same park for everyone. We want parks for each community that respond to their culture and people can feel that the park is for them. So a main part of our work is to actually work with communities alongside to design parks with them and not for them. So with that, we ensure that actually people use the park. And in the other hand, what we're saying is like people have the power to shape their own city and public space. In our cases, as immigrant, refugee, or descendant, we are actually leaving a mark. When we came to a country that doesn't respond to our needs, or a community that doesn't adapt, or that we don't have any voice in the way that we're living, I don't think that contributes to the process of welcoming or feel belonging. In the other case, if we bring people and bring their own culture into a space that they can shape and they can be part, I think they can express the best part of themselves and kind of have a full experience. So that's a question that I'd like to normally remind myself, who do you imagine in a park? And with that, I'm going to start sharing some of the pictures that we start taking. So next slide, please, Anthony. So these are from the first time that we went. I want to be honest, the picture is just one part of the project. So I want to emphasize on that. It's not just the pictures, but the pictures are incredible. I met this couple over there and she wanted to be a model her whole life. They have really good, interesting stories. So before we went to the park, we hired a neighbor from the community. We canvassed, we contacted organizations. So we start actually kind of identifying the network, and I have already been working there for over a year or 2 years in the neighborhood. So this is not just I just show up in a park, it's part of a bigger project. So here in this neighborhood in particular, we ask ourselves how we can increase ownership in public space, how people can feel more comfortable. So this is a tiny part of that. So this tiny part in the way that people can see themselves in public space and we also can see them. So next slide, please. This is the same day. The two sisters on your left, they actually saw us in the park, went to their house and put in their traditional clothes. Normally they don't wear that, but they wanted to be portrayed in that in their park. They live actually less than a block, actually across from the park. So that was very, I don't know, I was so happy to be part of all of that. One of the part of this project, this was the first step, but COVID actually messed up this. The second part of the project was actually a big exhibition in the same park with a local nonprofit that they do a party, but that was canceled. So we wanted to actually do installations with the picture there. And then we wanted to do postcards with the portraits, so people can actually send that to their families saying like, this is my park. And I want you to one day to come here and share. And this is why I love this park. So with that, we want to increase the sense of pride and that they are part of something. The next one. The next slide, please, Anthony. Okay, so this is the last one. There was the last one that we did. We have done 3 in total. And this was just, I was just honored to be part of this. This time we partnered directly with Reed Refugee Agency. So it's our local resettlement agency in Chattanooga. And they did the whole work. This time we just show up. And I think that's, well, the beauty of partnership, they have the trust. And again, it's not extractive that I'm just taking the picture of you. It has to be with something else around. We were there. On your left, she arrived 2 years ago, but her sister arrived a week before this picture was taken. And I don't know if I include their picture in this presentation, but we were able to take a picture of these 3 sisters that they haven't seen each other in 2 years. And I never thought I was going to experience something like that. Most likely, or like for sure, it was the first picture, professional picture in a park, in a public space in Chattanooga. And that was so meaningful. This particular part of Chattanooga is a very historical project. It's a Riverwalk, and Riverwalk is being under construction or development. It was created around 20 years ago. And normally what you see there is like people running, you see people walking, but it's most of the time it's a wide space. It's really like focused on more on that experience. So when we were there, actually, even visually, to bring more than 2 people of color at the same time, it changed the dynamics into the space. So the next one, right now we have, I just kind of selected a few of them. We have around 100 portraits. And what I want to just highlight to you, we want to build spaces for everyone. And normally when we engage in communities, it's really easy to engage with people that are very vocal and the people that you can connect with, that the barriers are no match. But what about the one that they're not taking the space that they deserve? And that's just what it takes time. And I think parks can be part of the solution, that what we need right now is like a neutral space that people can come together, and then you feel that you're part of something, that you can walk in a place that you help to design, or you feel safe, or you see more people like you. And the next one. So what is next? Normally when I do this kind of presentation, some people get inspired, and I have here about 2 or 3 people that just go and do the same experience. So we are actually building up a toolkit to explain a little bit step by step. We normally have some something that you can reuse and you don't have to recreate anything. We have the posters that we try to be very welcoming and opening, and kind of all the experiences that we have. Also talking about budget, this can be, I hear a person, he didn't pay anything and actually make people to pay so they can show up. Template. Thank you, Milzy. So the people just show up, the photographer donate their time. I don't encourage that. I think every artist should be paid, and we should actually honor their time. But if they want, that's up to you. We have people that done it, I think close to Detroit. So we want to help people to do it. I have done this project from $2,000 to $5,000. And you reach out around 30 families. And it can be, last time I think was with $1,000. And then we actually want to do the outdoor exhibition next year, hopefully, that it's gonna be more creating an experience that we can actually rotate in different parks in Chattanooga. And also we're gonna bring people from the pictures to meet people in their park and share stories. And then I just wanna go again over intention. Ask yourself, why do you wanna do this? What is the goal? Because the goal can be the picture. It has to be something else. This is just a tool that can help you to get to your overall goal with working with the community. So thank you for your time. And I think I have one more slide to say thanks again.
Thank you, Daniela. That was just so stirring. And I love how the Trust for Public Land connects all the pieces of change, not just the place itself, but the intention and the programming. All right, I believe we're going to be able to move into some Q&A now. And if you have questions of the individual speakers or on some of the themes that you heard, please put them in the chat. And our team will be monitoring the chat and getting questions to me so that I can be sure to include as many of them in our discussion portion as possible. And while our audience is thinking about their questions and posing them, I just wanted to share a few themes that came up for me in your presentations. Certainly around placemaking, obviously, but I noticed that everybody's project had an active element, like run errands in a different neighborhood, walk the walk, do a block project, come out of your house and be photographed in a public park. And so it made me wonder, and I'd love for everybody to respond to this, is belonging fostered exclusively when we leave our homes? Do we have to put bodies in the street to kind of reclaim or claim for the first time our communities? And I'm just curious about the elements of your programs that encourage people to leave their homes and what the why behind that.
I'll jump in and kind of start an answer or a response. I believe there is a different level of understanding and connection you have when your body is in a physical space to connect with people, but it can also happen in the virtual space as well. Especially, the pandemic last year helped us all understand how we have to reconsider and reimagine different ways to connect to people. And even though it is not as powerful as, touch and feel, it is still an alternative. And so an example I would like to give is just how even in the virtual space, you have to actively break down the same barriers that have ultimately been demonstrated in the physical space, algorithms, if you will. It's a form of segregation, but people seem to believe that, oh no, it's not anything I'm doing. It's just, the algorithm. But no, who you engage with, who you actively try to engage with, all contribute to the algorithm. So I liken the algorithm to systemic segregation, if you will, and what we have to do to diversify our algorithm is we have to like other people's stuff. We have to click and follow other people that might not be in our typical social network, so that you can be exposed to other people. So people that you get introduced to in this type of engagement, follow them, learn how to like stuff that they are sharing on their platform so that it can show up in your feed. So I think, it's real strong considerations for both the physical space and the virtual space, but we really need to be aware that we need to apply those same efforts to the virtual space. Otherwise, we'll be in silos again. And, you can determine which space you want to reserve for your own little community, and that's completely fine. Some people use social media just for family, but we need to be aware of the forces that continue to replicate a variety of ways in which we're segregated and to keep people from each other. And we have to be connected in order to disrupt these large systemic issues, because policies and laws won't get us there. It's the movement and the relationships that help amplify issues that can turn into policies. So That's my TED talk on that.
Thank you, Tonika. Policies and laws were name checked. Milzy, do you have a response?
Yeah, now that we're talking about policies and laws, I think I appreciate the question. And I think one of the things that's really important for our administration is really meeting people where they live, right? And so we just finished a park revitalization and we had this really great opportunity. We didn't know it was such an eyesore for community members. And so as we canvassed 2 years ago, they were like, this park, no one uses it. And the reason why we don't use it is because it doesn't look good. And the use that it's getting is criminal activity and it's really bringing down our park, our neighborhood. And so then bringing leadership there that actually, that DPW director, let's canvas around here, mayor, this is what's going on, and really leveraging and bringing like decision makers to the neighborhoods and seeing what people are facing is vitally important if you want to change policy and local government. Having them experience what our constituents are experiencing is probably the most important thing that you can do to influence some of the change here. And then 2 years later, because now it's like funding. And so we got to explain to people it doesn't happen overnight. We got to figure out how this money is, how it's going to come up, and how do we engage their residents to be part of that park build. Extraordinary park rundown. And then through this work, we found out the history of this park was really based on a local community leader who fostered so many kids, years ago. And so we were able to get the kids that she fostered present there too, and really revitalize this park. So going back, I can get very long-winded, but going back to this, I think the most important thing in engaging is making that face-to-face contact, listening to people, acknowledging them, and responding intentionally.
Daniela, what would you add about getting people active action, getting people out of their homes? How does it create belonging?
I really like that distinction, because for me, one of the ways that I understand belonging is that you don't have to explain yourself. And I think in our houses, our homes, you don't have to explain yourself. Some of us have that privilege. I think I know that not everyone is safe in their houses, but the ones that we are, it's very comfortable. So when we walk around and you stand up, or this is not, it didn't include you, this park renovation, you have to start explaining yourself, because you don't find a place that you can feel comfortable, and saying you have to mix, and you have to accommodate, and you have to make it yours. So when we start thinking, if we can bring the sentiment from when we're designing in, so hopefully people will feel more comfortable walking down the street, and they don't have to explain themselves the way that you use the park. We have, each culture actually have a different sense of how to use it. Each neighborhood actually, or each block can change. So it's not just the immigrant experience. And your also question made me remind me, I think it was a book or someone told me once, some refugees from Argentina went to a country in Europe, France, and they left in the 70s. And if you go to their houses, it looks like Argentina in the 70s. But we're in the 2000s. So it's also, when we think about this through the immigrant experience, it has to be also with our layers and what we want to remember. So it's also important to ask our city, how are we remembering the people that is here, or the people that was here? So because our cities tell our stories. So I think we have an opportunity here. If everyone feel comfortable, we're telling these people's stories, and we are not going to be forgotten. So that's, I think, the beauty between the individual and the collective imaginary, if we can all see ourselves out there.
That's like poetry. I'm trying to write down everything you said, Daniela. It was so beautiful. You said, belonging. It makes so much sense, and I never thought about it. Just explained that eloquently. Is where you don't have to explain yourself. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
I've been thinking about that so far. That's gonna make this most sense to me. And when you're among people, and I have experienced that, so I couldn't put it point it down, like what is different here?
Right.
Why right now I feel different? Recently, it was so strong what I was feeling because I was just alone, Black, brown, immigrant people, and I never felt like that in many years. So I was like, what is happening? And that was what's happening. Like my guard was down. I didn't have to explain anything. I just can be me. So yeah, so far that's what resonated with me.
Yeah, no.
The effects of code switching.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
what
it.
you're
That's
describing,
it right there.
Daniela. Yes.
Yes.
That's it right there. I love it. And how memory and telling stories helps us to not forget, and in a place that is fair and just, you feel reflected. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna try and write that down right quick.
Just a reminder that this will be recorded if you need it played back for
Good,
you.
that's right, it is. Let me stop.
As you looked at it, I was like, is someone asked me? I was like, oh, it was good. I should just also watch what I said.
I appreciate the energy here, the ideas, you know, the thought process is something, it's really incredible when you're amongst same minded people, and this is pretty exciting conversation.
It is. It is.
It is. It is. Each of you talked a little bit about how COVID had interplayed with your plans, or how you incorporated the coloring book, or social distancing, or trauma-informed care, or access, or different things into your approach. And I'm curious if you could talk about the ways in which you're thinking about the post-COVID might be ambitious, but in the COVID managed period that we're hopefully entering, what's the next step?
Well, I know what I shared with you all about the Folded Map Action Kit. I was just thinking about it for a year after Folded Map was exhibited in 2018. But once the pandemic hit, I was like, oh, I gotta do it now, because it was just an idea that was nagging. But once I realized, oh, the connection between deepening people's understanding in real time of what was happening with the disparity, even with the COVID pandemic, I was like, I need to speed up the process for creating it, because it was a way that people could still participate and understand in the actual critical moment of all of these, you know, this reckoning that, you know, we've referred to it as, for people to do that in a self-guided way on their own, you know, safely amongst the COVID protocols. So I know that the pandemic really did make me think about my project in the many ways that I would like to transfer it to other, for it to be accessible to people to engage as a result of not being able to have that face-to-face. So for me, it was really just thinking about how to be flexible, how to create work that can transition into a lot of different ways of delivery. And the pandemic really did, you know, force me to think about my work in that way, because during the pandemic, I also created the Folded Map film, which is an animated film explaining the project and the origin of it, because in-person presentations were canceled. So, you know, having the pressure of, you know, the pandemic really did force me to think about how I wanted to continue to share the work, and how to, you know, disrupt that what I viewed as another form of segregation, keeping people apart. So that's kind of what I learned in the pandemic.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for for many of us, it was a time of extreme isolation, but also extreme grounding in our block or our park or our like immediate area in a way that we haven't experienced in our adult lives. Daniela, how is the Trust for Public Land thinking about what's next in belonging as we emerge from COVID? Parks were some of the only places we could go in many parts of the
I don't, how do I say this? We were one of the ones that was happy during the pandemic for one, like that everyone was realizing how important parks are. We weren't happy about the pandemic itself, but we were excited about like that parks actually now have a place in our conversations, in our communities. Like it started turning like this center point, and also like the lack of access to parks also start being part of the conversation. Internally, we are shifting in the past years, and with the new leadership, a new age, but Diane, she's our CEO, and we start asking ourselves a few years ago, how do we center community into our work? My position itself is actually, I think, a demonstration of that. And the other thing, we have a lot of incredible team that do like GIS and data. We have software. We are very kind of like not complex, but very sophisticated in the way that we actually track where do you put a park? Like when someone asks you, what are the priorities? So we have a few indicators. We have we're more in these actually.
No.
I want to hear more.
I know. I was like, cliffhanger.
Daniela's audio is cutting out for us for a minute, but hopefully she'll be able to reestablish that connection. Milzy, I'm just curious about how you all are thinking about what's next in terms of belonging as people feel safe coming back out and engaging, and how you're picking from your priorities to continue the kind of structural work.
Yeah, thank you. So again, our priority in 2022 and for the next 3 years is really how do we institutionalize this work? And actually, why you asked that question, pulled up our strategic plan that we're finalizing right now. And so for our department, it's really 5 key metrics, and it's based on infusing, again, the equity work. So elevating engagement processes to be the best in class and cultivate community leaders to strengthen their neighborhoods. Like being known for this work and sharing it with other cities is going to be really important for us. Develop and implement a citywide community engagement plan. So right now we have a community engagement plan in our department. So now, part of our strategic process, and we share these strategic priorities with our council, and it gets adopted. Like here is like, now we're actually infusing this work across all city departments. Super exciting. Using public art and creative placemaking activities to enhance and enrich community engagement events. Tonika, that's why I want to certainly connect with you and Daniela with some of the work that you're doing. Again, one of our priorities, develop funding pathways to sustain this engagement work, and develop and expand language access work plans and policies and training. So again, how are we infusing accessibility for all of our residents, and how are we including all of our residents into these processes? So that's really on the community engagement side. I also oversee the Lancaster Office of Promotion and our visitor center that we're transitioning over to a welcome center for the city. And so a lot of planning and how that ties back to our welcome city certification.
I already have an idea for you, Daniela, and I.
Well, I think our PACE manager, which is our public art community engagement manager, Jalene, is also on this webinar. So
good. Yeah. Got it all mapped out already.
We'll just do a little planning while we're on this webinar. Sounds amazing.
Stay tuned for next year when we show our project.
Isha, there's a question in the chat. Should I respond to that?
I believe it's about how you come up with your different ideas for projects.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we talk? I would be interested in hearing from you both, but let's start with Milzy on where do you get your ideas from?
Sure.
I think this will be a great way to talk about like city informed structurally getting input, and then on the artistic and cultural side, like how do you get inspired and stay inspired?
Okay, great. Yeah, so for us, our program, so we have Love Your Block, we have Neighborhood Leaders Academy, we have Community and Police Working Group, we have just quite a few of engagement programs. Love Your Block was actually grant funded through Bloomberg Philanthropies and Cities of Service. And it was really like the foundation of teaching us on how to develop programming and engage with residents. And so that was actually an opportunity to really form what community engagement is here in the city. And we've expanded that program. Again, it started with 11 grants. Now we're like plus 60. The second part of it is really identifying gaps here in city government. So we're activating so many people. We're talking to them about leadership. They're showing up at council meetings, but sometimes not fully understanding what the council process is. So like we're engaging people. We're happy that everyone's there. And we also identify like there's an opportunity for us to actually start communicating and teaching people more about what this process looks like. And overall community needs. There might be like an emergency response that's happening related to whatever's bubbling up in the community, and we're developing programming around that. So those are really like the 3 areas. Oh, Daniella's back. Yay.
Yay.
Welcome back, Daniella.
We missed you, Daniella.
I hope it was like in the part that I was like, we were happy about the pandemic. I didn't say that. I was like, I don't know where I went off. Sorry about that.
We had an audience question, Daniella, about where we get our ideas from and how to build up a bank of ideas around belonging. So Milzy just talked about the kind of city approach, and then Tonika is going to talk about where she gets her inspiration about what to do next. And then Daniella, I hope you can merge back in with an answer to that as well. Tonika.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, for me, it's my home, my neighborhood, you know, my roots here and me learning to value them, and how really valuing my neighborhood enough to ask particular questions, and in learning that in my pursuit of those answers, how my neighborhood, my family, my individual story aligns with so many others is where the inspiration comes from. And an example I could give is, Folded Map attempts to, help people understand segregation and how it impacts us personally today. But there was still the question of, why is my neighborhood still this particular way? And so, my pursuit to answer that question led me to what I'm working on now, my current project, which is Inequity for Sale, and it's visualizing the discriminatory practice of land sale contracts in the 50s and 60s. And me learning more about that helped me understand in a way that I would not have been able to before, the way in which Indigenous people feel, because their land, like land sale contracts, Black would-be homeowners, their homes were stolen from them legally with binding contracts. So it was the land that we're all on, and specifically in Chicago with me doing this project, just the irony. I'm doing a project about homes that were stolen, legally stolen from Black people through land sale contracts on land that was stolen from Indigenous people through treaties. So, it helps me understand how I can be in solidarity with other groups of people. So really me just planting myself in my own neighborhood and valuing it enough to do so is what inspires me, which is why I really think people should reconsider the importance of home, or what they define as home, and learn to share those stories and questions that you have about home, because who knows what it will encourage you to create or to share with others. So that's pretty much where my inspiration for projects comes from.
Daniela, do you want to speak to how you get your ideas for your projects, and then maybe also how the
Sure.
Trust Land thinks about the next projects to advance its mission?
Yeah, I think I'm a lucky one when I hear Tonika. It's some of us can bring our whole self to work, so our kind of like experiences, but sometimes they can be on the way, at least for me, because when we create parks, I mean, I have a lot of ideas what we can do for a park, but what I try to be very conscious about my perspective on it, but in the things that I can understand maybe more about barriers. So how we can skip those barriers to bring people into the process and then hear them not even what they want. That's very like that's something that we are learning, not ask what people want. It's like more, what do you do in the outdoor? Where do you go? It's more like about experience and not like kind of do a reduction of like what they want to see, because also that can be very biased. You don't have much experience that you haven't seen other cities or the rest of your own city. So it's kind of like a mix. I think as a kind of like, I think my position gave me like a project manager or something. Something along those lines. It's understanding my own limitations and also like my own history. I'm bringing that into work. I think very conscious if you have people that can actually can have a better understanding of the communities that you're working with, and then understand the community that you're working with. I think it's kind of like a good mix. And then if we get more into like tips, I always highly recommend to work with artists, but not at the end of your project. We normally think like, oh, and in that wall, we want to put a mural. And then when you're done with your project, you contact an artist and like paint something there. So what about we bring artists into the beginning of the process? Because artists, when we just think about artists, because of what they do, is very dehumanizing. When you know, even here with Tonika, like the way that they think add way more to the project, very flexible and artistic way. So when we bring their home self to the project, so maybe yes, it was a mural, but it was other aspect that we didn't think about. And people, so it's adding more people into the process that normally it takes longer, and you are not sure where you're going to end it up to. So we have to be kind of really open to like, this is going in a different way and it's taking more time, and we need to figure out another kind of funding. It has to be with funding. We need to start working with more unrestricted funding so we can explore more and take more time. So I would say, bring yourself to work, be aware of your, you know, what you're bringing, work with community alongside, bring different perspective. Artists is the one that I really just, if we can just bring more and hire them and pay them. Oh, pay them.
Hire artists, period, in everything you do, right, Daniela?
So when they say like, oh, I wanna grab your brain, or no, that has a price. It's like they have to be in the budget. And in order to have a budget, we have to have funding, and funding also have to be very unrestrictive. And I know those things are hard to find, but I think if we can start thinking in that way, it will be the norm. And then for the Trust for Public Land, what we're seeing now, so last time pandemic, yes, everyone realized that parks are important. So now how do we move forward? We're thinking, when we think about parks in the way, at least in the experience in Chattanooga, and I think it translates in other like middle-sized cities, parks, the first encounter with the outdoor. So if you feel comfortable with the park in your neighborhood, you're most likely gonna want to explore a little more. So parks are the first introduction to your city. Parks are we learn democracy in parks. You know, democracy happens outside. If you can meet your neighbor and if you can talk to them, we are exercising a muscle, and that's not happening everywhere. So right now we are trying to talk about parks also in that perspective. Parks are not just parks. They are a social container for social interactions. So we need to reinforce that muscle. And the Trust for Public Land right now is also going through a transition. We're gonna start having, I don't know if actually I can share this, but really interesting things are happening. And in the next months, we're gonna be sharing more about our expertise, because normally when people think about us, they think about we're a conservation agency, which we are, but we are more than that.
I love that Jordan put your quote in there, because I was that was so beautiful. Yeah, but the creative thinking of artists, and I'm definitely in alignment with you there, because I always tell people, you know, it's the process to creating the thing that is often more important than the thing, because it might change. And that's what happens when you are more inclusive, and people have to get taught how to do so, because there is a cultural hierarchy in how we even operate within creating projects. You know, I am very similar to you. I've learned to be flexible, and I love involving people because they add so much value to the process that can change the outcome for the better. Folded map, just to use an example, I didn't create the project with map twins in mind. I created it only wanting to photograph addresses, because I didn't want to deal with people. I was like, I don't want to, I just want to prove the segregation is still a problem, and it's racist, and it's inequitable. But taking pictures of people's houses, you're gonna meet people. And I met Jennifer. Yeah. And when I met her, aha, map twins. If I did not have that conversation with her when she asked me, why are you taking a picture of my house?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had the idea for map twins. And if I weren't flexible, like you said, and open to the value of engaging her curiosity, engaging the curiosity of an Inglewood resident, allowing their home to invite someone, then that project wouldn't have happened. So it's really important that we do change our systems so that they can accommodate that type of thinking, that creative thinking. Since they have a term for design thinking, design process, I think we need one. Like
we should come up with one here. There's
there's
one
was a term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
That's
go.
a good one.
Daniella, I do want to touch base on what you said about, you know, making sure that we are providing services and resources and support for the people as we're working with them. You're right. Your expertise is like living on that block. We want to get information. We want to understand what's happening on the block. You're the block expert. We're knocking on your door. And so how, if we're beginning to have boards, commissions, and authorities, which we have here, right? And so that's like a volunteer. But and if we're starting to say we want to start working more with residents on like advisory boards, what does that look like? And so really identifying what the residents' needs are. We've started to provide meals during this time. So if we're going to host a meeting at 5:30, like we should be feeding people, right? And are there technology issues, and do we need to provide technology for folks? And what's the best time of day for us to meet with them? So it's not only compensating, it's really compensating the resident, you know, for their time, and that's their expertise. So I couldn't agree with you more. It's an oversight, and it's a assumption that a lot of people make, like, hey, you're an artist, can you just, what are your thoughts on this? Well, you should, that's actually, you know, that's,
what is your fee? That should be the first question. How much?
Yeah.
I've done so many free consultations in my and didn't even realize, like, I just gave them a whole bunch of ideas.
Yeah.
You know, because we don't think of them as that way. You know, it's just generative. So we're just like, oh yes, you know, because we understand the process. But you know, we do as artists, you know, have to realize that that has a value, because even if it's not what will be used, the idea you suggest, it still helps advance the thought further. And so, you know, artists also have to learn to value just the ideation process and learn that that has a cost too sometimes. But sometimes we're more than happy to do it with people like Milzy. I'm gonna be more than happy.
Yeah, because I think in a conversation you also get something, so it's more like a, you know, a construction, a constructive kind of thing. The other tip that I would say, like, I normally say I work in phases. So I don't know how many phases we're gonna have, but for sure we're in phase 1. And kind of like we get to know people, and that we need different tools, and that takes time and trust, and we start building trust. And so that, and then to your point, the expertise we have learned. So maybe more than how to create ideas, one of our principles, how I work, it's like, how do we bring more people into our process? Like always, like how? And even when we think like, no, we are experts here, to your point, it's like, we are experts on parks. We know how to do parks. Like we have all the system and experts that you can think. So one example, I'm gonna make it sure. Some kids in a neighborhood identify wanted more trees in their park. So okay, you will say like, great. They identify you. We have the trees. We work with the city tree commission. We put the trees in the park. We are experts. I mean, we know where trees go, like what trees and all of that. Well, what about we bring community into that? So we brought the kids into the park. I asked a designer to do like cardboard trees, like 6 feet tall, and the kids already play in the park. So they have the experience of how to move in the park. And we asked them, where would you like to see a tree? Put the tree there. So they took the trees around the park, and we start mapping that. So we also taught them how actually do mapping, how to do landscape architects. And we use all that input to actually do our experts. And with that, we guide where to plant the trees. So I didn't think about this project one day. It was like, how do you bring more people into your process? Always you can bring more people. Like you always can bring more, and they always want to have kind of the expertise. Kids also have expertise. They play and they know the park better than us. So I think that's more like how you can have more ideas.
Well, Milzy, Tonika, Daniella, these are all the notes that I took just for my work. I really appreciated this conversation. I have about 18 questions that we didn't get to, so maybe we need to schedule a part 2. But we do have to leave it here for today. And just with my incredible thanks for the level of this conversation and the contributions that you're making in your local communities, just really incredible. For those who are attending, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar has been recorded, and you will get a recording emailed to you. And if you have questions, you can contact my colleague Jordan, and that's Jordan, Jordyne, at welcomingamerica.org. And if you don't follow us or you're not connected to us on social media, you can do that on some of the handles that you see here and get a lot more of this content and get notified when we're doing discussions like this. So please get on over and give us a follow, and we'll push more of this great content your way. And again, I just want to thank each and every one of our speakers for their presentations and their projects and their thoughtful contributions to what it takes to create structural and cultural belonging in practice. Plenty more to say, but we have to leave it there for today. So thank you everyone for your time, and this concludes our webinar.